And we are live. As always, no one's here. So we're going to let you come in for a minute. I always like to start right off the bat, but it just doesn't make sense because people are like, oh, notification. If you're just joining us, it is Tuesday, December 7th, 7:01 p.m. on the East Coast. It's Just Ethan. It's been, let's see, a month since I've been on, at least Just Ethan. So I'm excited to have everyone here. If you're just joining us, let us know you're here. Let us know where you're viewing from. And let us know your favorite flavor cookie. Because why not?
It depends where it's from.
Really?
Yeah. You know, like growing up, I used to like Subway, and I haven't had Subway in years. So I love their double chocolate chip cookie, but now definitely not my favorite.
Huh. I didn't eat Subway cookies till I was in Boston for treatment, and it was like when I was living on the street, and that's I could only afford Subway, so I would get their raspberry cheesecake cookie, and it was really good.
See?
Yeah.
Good cookies.
They do have good cookies. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please say hello. Let us know you're here. Your name or your screen name will appear. Let us know where you're from. And we're going with favorite type of cookie, or favorite flavor cookie, I should say. And we will get started in just about 30 to 45 seconds. We have a special treat in store for you. Hi, Nancy, in McAllen, Texas. Favorite chocolate chip cookie. We like Texas. Liz and I are both Texan born and raised. I no longer live there, but Liz is still there. Hasn't been able to get out.
Ethan misses it every day.
I do, especially in July.
That's right. August is the best.
Yeah, August is awful. Also, I loved going to the mall. Mrs. Fields chocolate chip cookies were really good when I was a kid.
Yes.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you. Oatmeal raisin. See, like oatmeal raisin is good if there's not another option, and then you eat it and you're reminded that it's really good. And you ask yourself, why don't I eat this normally? But then when there's other options, you eat those. That's my take on oatmeal raisin.
Fair.
All right. So if you're just joining us, we have a very special guest. Liz McIngvale's in the house. I didn't even write down her bio. We know who she is. We love her. Hi, Lois from Long Island. Toll House chocolate chip cookies, homemade from scratch. Lois, we'll talk about sending addresses and exchanging food later. If you're just joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome to a special edition of Just Ethan. Special guest Liz McIngvale. Very excited to have Liz tonight. We're going to ask each other questions, like hard-hitting, straight to the gut. We don't know what we're going to ask each other. We really don't. But we're going to ask each other questions. Hopefully they apply to something in your life. At the end of the day, you just want to share, be vulnerable, and support where we can. Please keep letting us know you're here. Tell us where you're from. And hi, Mom. Tell us where you're from and your favorite cookie. And if you say an internet cookie, you'll get booted because that's ridiculous. Nobody said that. I just thought of that joke, but I'm just saying. So let's quickly go over the housekeeping rules real quick. This town hall is intended to serve as, with Just Ethan is intended to serve as educational content, education in air quotes on this one, and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. It should not be used if you are in distress or feel unsafe. If you're in crisis or ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. We also always want to be respectful and kind of others, create a safe space as possible. So with that, please know that we are recording this for all social media platforms. It will be on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, various other places. So we always want to be kind, respectful, and to everyone. But we also like to have candid and honest conversation. So if you don't feel comfortable sharing, knowing that it's going to be there, please do so at your own discretion. Hey, Rachel. Yeah, I know it's Midnight. Midnight in Manchester is a great name for a book, like a mystery movie about chocolate chip cookies. Last thing, and then we'll actually go in. I'll let Liz talk for a second. M&M's came out with sugar cookie M&M's. They're white chocolate sugar cookie. And my girlfriend's mother sent me a bag because I guess she hates me or whatever, but they're insane. So if you like sugar cookies, I highly suggest, Fran, if you put a link to sugar cookie M&M's, I don't know, Walmart, Target, anybody, anywhere that we're not promoting that. Maybe we have to put 5 examples of that superstore, but regardless, M&M sugar cookies. Liz, how are you?
Good. It's good to see you. It's good to see everyone. And talking about cookies, I'm quite hungry. But yuck, Teresa says Ethan about your cookies. So I don't know if we should put that link or not. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm usually not here in the evening, so it is fun being able to be here with you. And I'm kind of scared about what you're going to ask, but also looking forward to what we're going to discuss tonight, because I'm thinking this will be a different, raw and live, unfiltered, just Ethan than normal.
That's right. That's right. This is real. But also you get to ask questions too. So if you're just
I
joining,
didn't know that, so I better prepare.
oh, I didn't prepare either. I didn't write anything. But no, we're asking each other questions.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah,
So
no.
if y'all have crazy, intense questions you want me to ask Ethan, just put them right here in your comment box so that I can be sure to ask along the way.
Leave her hanging for at least 10 minutes without questions before we give her questions. But if you're just joining us, I'm super excited about today. So today's topic, as always, we want to keep this as conversational as possible. So as we talk about things, please comment, weigh in, give us thoughts, give us suggestions. We'll ask you questions as well, as always. Oh, well played, Fran. Well played. Amazon Smile, chocolate candies, MS cookies. Yes. If you want to get some delicious M&Ms and donate to the IOCDF at the same time, follow that link below. It's a win-win. Incidentally, I think Teresa was talking about sugar-free cookies, not the M&Ms. Anyway, so tonight is all about Liz and I talking about each other, which sounds weird, but really want to dive in and talk about maybe our OCD journey, some things that you don't hear us talk about when we're giving talks and speeches and whatnot. And if you have candid questions for either one of us, please feel free to put them in the chat. Any way you want to weigh in. As you know, these conversations are all about you. And so we look forward to hearing from you. First of all, Liz, and we can just go back and forth. I just want to hear how you're doing right now, and how are the holidays, and how was Thanksgiving, and how was your OCD, and lots of new things in your life. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel like that's a easy answer, and it's complicated. I was actually talking about it earlier. I think candidly, I've been just feeling a little burnt out across the board in the sense of like, I'm somebody who I like to go, and I don't know what it is. I haven't had as much energy lately, maybe, but the going at the level that I do has been a little bit more draining than normal. So I've just been aware that I need to somehow do some self-care and take some breathers. But OCD and anxiety, like, happy to dive into that, obviously today, but it's going pretty well. And I feel like I'm at a place where the more I teach it, the more I get to practice it. And and I'm actually doing that. I think there was a while where I talked about that, but I put my own work on the back burner, and caught up with me. And at this point, I feel like I'm doing my own work and it's not catching up. So that's a good place to be, OCD wise.
I would say that's an excellent place to be. Hey, Deirdre. Hey, John. Hey, Don.
What about you? What about you? How was your Thanksgiving? How's your OCD? How's your anxiety? Truly, really not a I'm good answer.
Oh, nothing to complain about. No complaints over here. It's been good overall. The Thanksgiving was good. I think that my OCD this month has been challenging at times. I've been very stressed with work, and the hey, Margaret, good to see you. Yeah, self-care is important. I've been very stressed with work, and when you get stressed and you sort of have to self-care in life, sometimes it's hard to manage OCD too. So I think my OCD got much louder this week and this month at times than it has in previous months. It didn't mean that I necessarily compulsed, but I think it was challenging to navigate and to sort of say to yourself, okay, I need to be a little bit more of a warrior today and utilize skills and tools, and as I used to be, and then not stigmatize yourself for that, and not feeling like you failed in some way or made a mistake or you've become weaker. It's simply just OCD behaving as it behaves. And I also can give myself a lot of self-compassion, because I was out of my comfort zone for a lot of the month, doing a lot of really neat things, but really scary things and stressful things, but fun things, whether it's work related or advocacy related or otherwise. And so I would say that it was a challenging month, or November was, but really well worth it. And while not, every day wasn't a success, I definitely had more good days than bad. And that was that was definitely a win. And I'm happy to go into more detail. I know that's kind of the high
Yeah, I
level.
want you to. Like, and I want the, like, because this is about us not being advocates, but being each other, right now. And we're still advocates while we're human. But like, what does more challenging mean? Like, what specifically, like what triggers did you have? Where does OCD still kind of get you sometimes?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I had a lot of triggers. Two things. I had a lot of food triggers. So for me, I don't. If you've heard me tell my story, I talk a lot about fear of harm, self harm, hurting myself, things like that. That hasn't popped up in quite a while. Neither is health anxiety. The thing that still gets a little sticky for me is contaminated food, some emetophobia stuff. But if food is bad or undercooked, things like that, and especially when I've got a lot of things to do that have high importance or a lot of responsibility, because then I can't afford to get sick. I can't afford. And what's funny is for me, if I had to really be honest with myself and candid with you, it's even less about, let's say, getting sick and having food poisoning, and
Sure.
and it's way more about my reaction to it. The last time I had food poisoning was in 2016, is at the Chicago conference, and I don't know if those of you remember this or not, and I don't know that I've ever talked about this in public, but I was a disaster. I was a complete mess. I was a complete mess, and yeah, I was a complete. And I was when I got sick, and I got sick with someone else. We both ate. Yeah, Margaret remembers because Margaret had some food stuff too. But I was in my room and I was a disaster. I was way sicker mentally than the illness was causing. I was having flashbacks of when my time in a psychiatric hospital. I was having PTSD. I was having anxiety. I was having so many things that were all triggered by an illness, and I really didn't understand the relation to it all. But and I don't mean to divert. I did feel good though that I was like at a hotel with like 700 therapists, so I felt like I was in a good, safe space. Although I remember talking to Dr. Janicki, and he's like, "Do you need to be admitted somewhere?" And I'm like, "No, no. Why would you even say that to me? Don't need to be admitted somewhere." I digress though. But just like anybody else, that time sticks out in my head. I get stuck on that, and I remember that night. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think I fear my my mental health and my actual reaction to an incident more so than I fear the sickness itself. And so,
Yeah, and we see that a lot. We see where what sometimes patients will identify as like, I'm not necessarily even that afraid of the actual thing, right? Like some people say like, okay, getting a disease or, fear of whatever it might be, like I can actually like tolerate that, or I know people that might have, but it's the anxiety around, if I got it, how would I deal with it or how would I manage it? And so it's almost more of like the fear of distress and the fear of how to tolerate the distress than the actual fear. So my push to you, as you know, I'm going to ask is, what are you doing about it? What exposures are you doing? What does it look like? Where are you choosing
no, that's a great
uncertainty?
question. And I have another piece of that. And that was the question that I asked myself, because before, when I had really bad OCD and health anxiety, for me, I was afraid of throwing up because what would it mean? What did I have? Was I going to die? What if I never stop?
Mhm.
Do I have stomach cancer? And when I got better, my health anxiety really took a back seat. And so like I couldn't figure out in that moment what I was like. I wasn't even worried about like if it was an illness or if it wasn't. I knew it was food poisoning. And so it was like, well, if you know what it is, then why are you still scared of it? And it was like I had trauma around it. Like I was trained. It was very behavioral. What do I do about it? So that's a great question, Liz. And the other thing I will group in, the other thing that I struggled with a lot this month was sitting with discomfort around meetings at work or with people. I had a lot of important meetings where I had to do a lot of presentations and I had to perform at high levels. And I really questioned how I did, what I said, if I said the right thing, if I said the wrong thing, if I pissed somebody off, what if I pissed somebody off? What if I lost work? I ended up homeless somewhere, essentially, is where I ended up by.
Sure.
So the only I'm not.
And I would say that's probably more social general anxiety. I mean, maybe some OCD perfectionism, but a lot too of kind of that general anxiety as well, but similar spirals, right?
Yeah. So to your point, I don't actively pursue exposures. I don't plan an exposure out, but I already know that my day is going to be filled with exposures. So I will say my obsessions increased probably 80 or 90% over the course of November. My compulsions probably increased about 20 to 30%. So, what did resistance look like? I worked very hard to eat the thing that was scary, sit with the discomfort, go about my values, engage in conversation, be mindful. I think there's a point, and Liz may agree or disagree. For me, especially if I'm in a social situation or I'm engaged in something, I typically won't try to have an internal mental dialogue to try to scare myself more, or be like, you're going to die and you are going to throw up and you're going to do this. Not to not do it, but because I feel like the other choice I have in the matter is to sit with the discomfort of maybe that will happen and engage in real life and focus on real life and participating in conversation and participating in whatever the activity is. And then if it exacerbates beyond that in my own private time, then I can go into more of a response prevention and look at ways to continue to trigger myself.
So I'm getting excited because I'm like, this is kind of cool. Like, let's do a live case study. And like, just to like, I think it's helpful. We can do it for each other, but it's helpful for everyone listening to like understand, what does ERP look like for this type of OCD? Like, what does treatment look like, right? So one of the things Ethan's talking about is kind of choosing to sit with discomfort yet still engage in activities, because that's like, he's got stuff to do, right? It's Thanksgiving, it's the holidays, whatever it might be. What I would push you, Ethan, to say is that I don't recommend anybody lean into the discomfort with certainty. So I don't think exposures need to be, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to die, this bad thing's going to happen. But instead, I think the best exposures are the uncertainty. So it's actually just leaning into the unknown. Like, I might have eaten something bad, I might not have. Like, I guess I'll find out later, right? Or like may have a really bad day tomorrow. Or right, for you, the discomfort to lean into that would be important is like, I might have to feel really anxious and distressed if I end up with food poisoning, and I'm taking that risk, right? Because the reality is you take that risk every day. With every meal you eat, you take that risk. But whether or not we intentionally choose to accept that risk is one thing or another, right? I talk about this with my patients all the time. So someone who has a fear of HIV, right? They might talk about, if I'm at Starbucks or I'm at the grocery store and I go to check out, and while I'm checking out, I see that the cashier has a Band-Aid on their finger. And so I have to throw all those groceries away, right? Or I can't use them, I have to clean them. And my push is like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, you wouldn't take that risk because it seems high. So do you think you never take that risk? Like, you ever eaten at a restaurant? Do you know that no one in the back has a Band-Aid on? Have you, right? Like, we take the risk, but we don't know. And so with OCD, where we push it, what makes it triggering is when we intentionally think about it, when we intentionally know that we're taking that risk, versus a lot of us, we've all been in this situation, myself included, where we're like, man, I wish I wouldn't have known that. Right? Because like, now I'm super triggered, but I didn't know I wouldn't be triggered. But isn't that hilarious that like the situation doesn't change? It's just the knowledge we have that like, oh, now I have to know about this risk, even though I was already taking it on. We're like, one way or the other, we would have taken it on, but one way we wouldn't be triggered, but now we are, because we know this info.
And can you all relate to that? I'm curious if you have stories where that's happened to you. In what ways do you live into your values, or that you choose to, when something arises for you that maybe hasn't poked out in a while, how have you dealt with it? But also, I wish I wouldn't have known. Yeah, they're so true. Like, to the emetophobia point, I can't tell you how many times, especially when I was really struggling with OCD, but even after the fact, when I was having a great day and I had spent all this time with somebody, and then they said, this happened like on more than one occasion, they would go, well, I got to get home. My kid has a terrible stomach virus. He puked all night last night, and I got to get home and take care of it. And I'm like, oh, I was just with her all day. Why did you have to say that? Like, I would have been fine if I didn't know, but now I'm a wreck. But to your point, Liz,
your risk didn't change, whether you knew or not, right?
No,
you already spent the day with that person.
Yeah, for sure. But to your point, Liz, and I like that is, and it brings up a great point about OCD is, let's say I can tell you exactly. I was at a dinner at a conference at the beginning of November, and I was out with 20 people for my work, and it was at a really fancy place, and I had it in my head that the chicken was undercooked, but I didn't want to not eat it because then I'd be giving into the OCD. But I was still worried about eating it. And so, I think the other thing you do by leaning into your values and sort of willing to live with the possibility that it may happen is, it feels irresponsible to not focus on it. It feels irresponsible to not take action and do something about it. And I know there's so many examples of that with OCD where, if I don't do something, I'm risking something. And so to Liz's point about like living with the possibility, not that it will happen, but the possibility that it might, and engaging with that value is really not ignoring. It's letting it be there, but at the same time, letting that feeling of irresponsibility be there while you're engaging in something meaningful. And I
do want to push a little bit because I think there's also a narrative that a lot of times we accept that like, okay, so the way life with OCD is we have to accept that like we can struggle and we can still live by our values. And so I think a lot of times, and I'm going to push this and a lot of y'all are going to disagree, which is good. I want you to, right? But a lot of times we start to accept that like, okay, what we're going to actually accept is that life will be a struggle, but guess what? You can feel like shit and still do awesome things. And I want to push that like, yes, that's true, but that's also not what we're accepting. So I see so many patients who come to treatment with us where they are under the belief that like, okay, management of OCD means that I have to accept that I'm kind of always going to struggle and I'm always going to feel crappy, but I can still do my values-based things despite feeling bad. That is not the message of therapy, right? And even Ethan's telling you like, he's been more triggered this past month. But this isn't a constant, right? And it's not what he's accepting. He's not accepting that like, yeah, I need to keep feeling this way. It's like, oh, heck no. Like the goal is that you experience so much freedom that OCD isn't even there. And if it comes back, you welcome it because you know what to do. Like you have no fear of OCD. You have no fear of triggers because they can't catch you off guard. They can't throw you for a loop. And so I'm pushing us because I do think sometimes the messaging that like, maybe gets misconstrued between ACT and OCD or whatever it might be is, okay, so what we have to do is struggle with OCD, but just still choose to push through and live by our values. And yes, sometimes we have to do that, right? I'm not debating that sometimes, but that's white knuckling. You don't have to survive life with OCD. You can thrive in life despite having OCD, right? And so I always want to push people that the goal is not that like we struggle, but we make it, right? And I used to think that was the goal, I'll be candid. Like for me,
it's not always white knuckling though. You can engage in a value in a meaningful way, appreciate the fact that you're not feeling well.
If you're leaning into uncertainty.
That's what I'm saying.
If you're not leaning into uncertainty, if you're just like, okay, here's an exposure, but I'm still going to push through to this value because the value is important and I'm going to focus on the importance, that's white knuckling. I'm going to push. And white knuckling isn't useful because what all that does is suppresses, right? But like if Ethan's saying, if you welcome the uncertainty of like, yeah, you know what, I might get sick and I'll figure out tomorrow, but for now I'm still going to go be with my friends for dinner. That is the life, right? That is the golden treatment. That is that's what works.
Liz brings up such a clutch point because, and I've talked about this and I talk about it in the documentary, up until I got better, I thought life was about functioning and not functioning. That's literally how I divided life.
Yep.
So for me, and I actually, because I didn't have any insight into my OCD or education, I believed that when I was functioning, I wasn't sick. And when I wasn't functioning, I had really bad OCD. And then I got treatment and they were like, no, you have really bad OCD all the time. And I'm like, no, I don't. I do all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, and here's all the other stuff you do too. And I didn't get that, right? So when I got into therapy, and ERP makes it worse before it gets better and all this stuff, like at first it was about getting back to the functioning. And it was about living crappy days, but doing things that were meaningful anyway, and going to work and crying and going to work and obsessing and going to work and compulsing, but coming back to the moment and going out on a date, but being miserable.
But having a job, but going on a date. So like, that's how we value success.
Right. But then, and I talk about this, but then there was a shift that I wasn't expecting where suddenly I started to have joy and meaning and feel good. And suddenly going out with friends was fun. And as I described it, I felt like an alien because as far as I know, I was born with OCD and I never really enjoyed anything that people liked. I would watch Wheel of Fortune with my grandmother at 24. Somebody would win a trip to Greece and they would be excited. And I would turn to her and go like, why would they want to leave home? That sounds terrible. I would never want to travel. Like, oh my God, what if something happened? What if my parents died? I can't leave. Like, I didn't get it. And I felt like an alien. As an alien that came down to earth for the first time. And I was like, food tastes good. I can enjoy this. Going out with friends. This is fun. And I really think the sweet spot to treatment, and it really, I don't know if Liz agrees or disagrees because we haven't had much of this conversation. I really feel like that piece of joy and serenity and happiness that you can have while you have OCD happens in that last top of your hierarchy, that last sort of 10% where you really have to take that leap and surrender and let that scariest thing be there and be okay with it being there. I feel like that's where it transitions over from strictly a life of functioning to strictly a life of functioning and experiencing the emotions that are amazing that come with it. And so to Liz's point, I think that's so clutch. No, treatment and therapy is not about coexisting with your OCD and doing things, but being miserable. It's about living without your damn OCD.
Yeah.
Like,
and I can't I just can't emphasize that enough. I love what you just said, Ethan, and I'm gonna agree and kind of double down, which is that, so the top of the hierarchy, whatever y'all call it, some people use hierarchy, some people don't, doesn't really matter, right? The top of the work, it's not about the exposure itself. It's about the fact that if you are doing the things at the top, your last stuff that's left, the things you've been avoiding, the things you've been too scared to work on, what that actually means is that you're now fully committing to uncertainty. That's the golden, right? It doesn't matter like, okay, it's these level 10s, it's level 9s, but it's when do we fully commit to uncertainty? Because once you release and you give up certainty and you commit to a lifestyle of uncertainty, you get full freedom. You get to have joy. You get to be present because you can't be stuck. You can't commit to uncertainty and still be searching for certainty, which is the only place OCD lives. And all of you might say, well, why would we commit to uncertainty? That sounds terrible. That sounds horrible. And we actually started with reason why. You already do. You already live a life with uncertainty. You just may not know it. But OCD tricks us to believing that if we know it, now it's more dangerous. If we know it, we're taking a higher risk. No, we're not. You're already accepting uncertainty. By living life, you already accept uncertainty. It just feels bigger when you're aware of it or when OCD makes it visible to you. The second reason is it isn't possible to not live with uncertainty. That's literally impossible. Everything in life, you're accepting uncertainty across the board, right? That's how we live. That's how we function. That's what life is. That's what living is. The third, which is probably more important that Ethan and I talk a lot about, is what do you give up in the search for certainty? What do you lose? And I'm going to push that the more you want to be certain, the more you give into OCD, the more you lose. You lose relationships, you lose time, you lose family, you lose all those sort of things, right? And so the last one that I always push people no one loves, and Grayson will give you guys a lot of these, is how do you know your rituals are the right ones? All right, so I can probably find a flaw in any of your rituals, just like you could mine. We're all masters at it, right? Of yeah, but you missed this or you didn't do that, right? And so and the ones you're doing, how do you know that's actually what works to prevent this feared outcome, right? We don't. And so the point is we accept a lifestyle of uncertainty already. And if we can commit to it and we can truly do it for OCD, we will have freedom. What I don't want anyone to think, I love what Ethan said, is our external accomplishments are not relatable or are not relevant. Certainly they're not predictors of whether we have freedom from OCD. And I thought that for a long time, just like you, Ethan. I thought if I'm going to school, if I graduate, if I have a job, if I'm showing up to work, that means I'm succeeding, right? Because I have horrible OCD and I'm doing these things. And I actually believe that's what I had to accept for my life, that I needed to accept life was always going to be really bad, but you could still make good out of it. No, screw that. Why would I do this for a living if I wanted y'all to accept that or I had to accept it? You can live a life with full freedom from OCD. Doesn't mean you still don't have to address it, right? But guess what? There can be a point where you have no anxiety around what OCD throws at you because you know how to handle it and you're not afraid of it, right? You're willing to step into that ring any day.
Yeah, I mean, and I love everybody's comments too. It's such a good conversation. I don't think Liz and I get to talk like this very often, so it's kind of fun.
No, we should do more. These are fun. I'm
Yeah.
gonna bring you on Wednesday mornings and we'll do some. I would love, like, I'm just thinking how cool it would be. I want to hear y'all's thoughts for us to do like this too, but case conceptualizations, like people to throw out, okay, this type of OCD, and for us to be like, okay, here's how you would do treatment. Here's how you would commit. Here's where sometimes we get hung up. Here's what we think we're doing right and it isn't. And we can always kind of, even on our own, we could just do different subtypes and walk through it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So I adopted and I had some amazing therapists, and I feel very blessed and fortunate, and that's not everybody's case. And Liz and I work tirelessly to not be the exception, to make that the norm for everybody. That's why we do what we do. But I learned very quickly that I needed to adopt a life of uncertainty. And to Liz's point, not just around OCD, around everything. And when you do that, not only does uncertainty become less scary, it actually becomes pretty cool and your friend. Because for me, like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And that's super exciting because, sure, tomorrow could bring a lot of stuff that I'm really afraid of. On the other hand, it could bring a call that could change my life forever. It could be I meet somebody that changes my life. It could work something. I mean, there's endless potential to what uncertainty can bring, and I appreciate that there's two sides to it, and I really love the embracing uncertainty in all things in my life. Not perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination. There are times where you get wrapped into work and you try to seek control of the things that you can't control, and you try to internalize to feel control and all this stuff, but really trying to come back to this adoption of all I have control over is my own focus and behavior. And beyond that, it's just lack of control and uncertainty around everything and being okay with that. The other thing I'll say is I feel like I was fortunate. I feel like I was fortunate in how sick I got, only because I really remember the moment where, and I talk about it a million times, but it's relevant here, is the moment where I had to embrace uncertainty for the first time. And I was willing to do it, which was, if you know my story, or if you don't know my story, regardless, I was in a bad situation in a house. I was not eating and not doing anything, and I needed to get better, right? And nobody was coming to help me and all this stuff. And for me, the only way to move forward and live, literally, physically, however you want to say it, would live, was to accept the uncertainty of my fears coming true. I had to put them out into the universe, which was something I was unwilling to do up to that point. And I was so ill. I'll candidly say I was probably borderline delusional. My belief in my OCD thoughts were so strong, even after 10 months of treatment, residential treatment, that, my beliefs were so strong that I literally felt like I was sentencing myself to death by deciding to, unwrap this cocoon that I felt was protecting me, was really killing me, and go with the potential of the thing that I feared most happening. Because the alternative in this case was the thing that I fear most was going to happen. I was going to die if I didn't move forward. I feel lucky and fortunate in some ways to remember that moment where I surrendered to uncertainty. Doesn't mean that I do it every time now and I'm perfect, but I do recognize from that lesson that it does take whatever your biggest fear is, whatever your OCD is stuck on, it does take being willing to let it be out there in the universe, and potentially it's going to happen. May not, may never, probably won't, most likely OCD, but even if there's a small chance, what am I giving up? To Liz's point, what am I walking away from, and what am I living towards? And I will tell you that my system, my approach to for the most part to OCD and ERP is very black and white, which usually is not a good thing, but it is. And you all have incredible stories, both of hope and of pain. And for me, my time in psychiatric facilities was absolutely terrifying, miserable. I have PTSD, nightmare, you name it. I'll tear up talking about it, but it was awful. And anytime I'm faced with a decision, whether to give into my OCD or not, like, most of the time, I will choose the fear, meaning I will choose to expose myself to whatever it is I'm afraid of rather than go back to that. I would rather die. I would rather throw up. I would rather have a head injury. I would rather, whatever the fear is, I'll take that almost every time over the life that I left and that I grew from. And like, for me, it's that black and white. Like, I'll immediately go back to that and be like, nope, I don't want that life again. I'd rather take a chance. And that's just as simple as it is for me.
So I want to push two things. First is that OCD specialty treatment centers don't have to be scary, and they can be amazing.
OCD specialty.
Okay, so I want to clarify that for those who might not know. I know you're not, right?
Yeah,
He's talking about general psychiatric hospitals, but right, like OCD treatment centers can be different, and we hope, but specialized OCD centers, right? Not some places say they treat OCD, but it may not be what they really focus on. And I want you to hear Ethan and I saying two things. And I'll end with the second that I think is just as important. But the first is ERP can be done well, standard ERP, and ERP can be life-changing. And I'm pushing this envelope. This is a new thing I'm really pushing lately, is that you can use ERP as symptom management, or you can use ERP to provide freedom. So what do I mean by that, right? You can play this game of whack-a-mole where every time an OCD symptom comes up, you do ERP for that symptom. And then the next symptom comes up and you do it for that symptom. And what you're actually doing is you're doing ERP for those specific fears, but you're not buying into uncertainty as a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is if my doorknob is contaminated in my office and you touch that doorknob and you cross-contaminate, the more you touch that doorknob and cross-contaminate, touch that doorknob. So the more you do that exposure without ritualizing, right? So touch the doorknob and don't go wash your hands. You will eventually extinguish the fear of that doorknob. That doorknob you'll overcome that fear, right? You'll habituate, you'll be better. Great. But what we hear a lot of times is like, okay, so I do that and then something else pops up and something else pops up. And why do ERP if I'm just going to have to deal with the next? And so what I would push is that ERP scenario was missing the most important piece, which is touching the doorknob, cross-contaminating, not ritualizing, and accepting the uncertainty of the fear. If the fear is that I might get a bloodborne illness and pass it on to someone I love, that's what you lean into after that exposure. And that's actually more important than the exposure itself. Because when you lean into that, all the other areas where this fear causes you to engage in rituals or increases triggers can go away. And it becomes this domino effect of like the first one you do it right, it knocks all the rest over, right? Because we're accepting uncertainty at the core of the exposures. The second is I really believe the greatest gift anybody can give anyone or any of us can receive is peace, right? Where peace of mind, the ability to be peaceful, to be present. And for those of you in the throes of OCD right now watching, I know you can agree that you would do anything in the world to just be at peace. You know, when we think about the old great thing that you give, the greatest gift is peace be with you, right? Offering peace. Uncertainty equates to peace. Accepting a lifestyle of uncertainty gives us an opportunity to experience peace that everybody deserves. And what I can promise you is that if you fully commit, you will get it. You'll buy it. Now, if we commit a little and sometimes here and sometimes there, but then we wonder why it's not really working, right? We might see some impact here, but like it's about a lifestyle of it so that you can feel it fully and be immersed in peace, which is what all of you deserve and would be my greatest wish that every person has.
Yeah, I always viewed ERP and OCD treatment like a math equation. You know, there's a right and a wrong answer. And if you get the right answer, you reap the rewards. And if you get the wrong answer, you still have OCD. And there's not some answer in the middle that's almost right. You know, I've always viewed it as you know, you go all in. And that's partly due to the clinicians that I had that would beat me over the head, literally and physically and, you know, figuratively. But no, I who are you, Liz? I love this. This is so good.
This is fun. I'm reading so many comments, so yeah. I don't know if you have any you want to pull up.
No, I was going to actually answer some questions. I'm going to jump in. So Nancy at 7:12 p.m. put Fran to work. I'm about to get a bit detailed. I unintentionally hit myself either on my chest or in my head as a result of any incoming intrusive thought. Is that common? I get so much anxiety when I am doing my compulsive behavior. I just hope I'm making sense. My doctor made a drastic change with my medicine due to OCD worsening.
We do see these tick-like behaviors or any sort of kind of like self-injurious kind of like oftentimes these behaviors or compulsions will be done in an attempt to neutralize the thought. So I have an intrusive thought and I'll kind of hit myself or, engage in this behavior. So we do see that is certainly very common and a common compulsion, but also one that we really want to focus on first, right? So in treatment, that's going to be the first one to reduce. Of course, if your safety is at risk, you need to take bigger measures, right? Versus waiting for your next therapy session. But that will really be the priority, is reducing any of the hitting rituals first before you start diving into other work. But it is very common, and we see it done frequently as a way to neutralize or an attempt to neutralize these thoughts, and it becomes a pretty clear compulsion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. We do questions on this show, very rapid fire. No, there's not 12 people. Sarah Stein at 7:21 p.m. Sometimes I'm good at not giving. This is not a question, but sometimes I'm good at not giving in to an obsession. Other times it can be hard to go about your activities without doing a compulsion when it literally feels like a fire of anxiety is going off in your brain. Not sure if anyone else feels like that. Yeah, you're not alone.
You are not alone. So many people feel like that, but let's talk about it, and let's talk about why and the mechanisms behind it. So Sarah, I'm going to push you that this is what I identify as white knuckling. If you do, for any of you, if you do an exposure and you find that we are still stuck or fixated on that exposure, my hair is so tangled. My gosh, sorry, y'all.
That's what we were on.
I know it's what you were worried about, but if you guys do an exposure and you find that minutes later you're still triggered, that's normal. We expect that. But hours later, a long time after, when we're doing activities, if we are still triggered by this exposure, and I often hear people will end it with like, and I just stay super triggered until I go do that ritual or until I can get some sort of reassurance or confirmation, right? So if it ends with that, that is white knuckling. And so what I mean by that, what is white knuckling? It's when we push through, but we haven't committed to uncertainty, right? So we have an intrusive thought. What if something happens to my mom? And we're triggered by it. We want to call her, but we say, okay, we're not going to call her. We're not going to do that ritual. We're going to go to work. But all day at work, I am still, what if my mom's not okay? You're right. All of those sort of behaviors that we might be doing, mental kind of rumination, any sort of reassurance seeking internally or externally, that is rituals. So I would push, are you still doing some rituals that is keeping that obsession alive? The obsessions stay alive when they have some sort of power, which is often through a ritual, or because we're holding on until we can either do a ritual or get confirmation later. However, if instead when you push, right, you have an obsession, you have an intrusive thought, you accept the uncertainty. Yeah, well, maybe something happened to my mom, maybe it didn't, and like I'm sure I'll find out later if something did, right? And then I go to work. While I might still be triggered, I forget about it. You all have had, if you drive, you've all had situations, right, where we're driving down the road and we have an intrusive thought of we could swerve off the road and kill that person if we see someone walking. Somebody without OCD might laugh at that thought, might think it was strange, whatever. But as they keep driving, they start thinking about their to-do list, things they have to do at work, stuff they got to do for their home. And by the time they get to work, they don't even remember they had that thought anymore. They still have the thought. And if someone were to ask them about it, they might say, oh yeah, I had that thought on the way here. That was weird. But unless someone brings it up, they don't even remember they had that intrusive thought. Someone with OCD, right? We look in the rearview. If you're triggered by this, you might look in the rearview mirror. You're worried about it. Why'd I have that thought? What does that say about me? Did I have that thought because I want to do that? Could I be a danger to other people? Do I want to hurt somebody else? By the time we get to work, we can't think about anything else except that thought and what it means about us. And I'm pushing because it's really, are we feeding it, right? Are we leaning in? Because what we could do is when we have that thought and we're triggered, we could be like, meh. Maybe one day I might actually hurt someone, right? I could make the choice to, turn my car off the road, but I'm still going to head into work. And we accept that weird thought. We accept the uncertainty of it. Our thoughts aren't unique. People with and without OCD have weird, intrusive thoughts. It's how we respond to them.
By head into work, you mean park in the parking lot or drive through the front?
You're so
it's 7:23 p.m. I'm just. This totally goes to our conversation. The answer is uncertainty, but my intrusive thoughts are rational and attack beliefs I value that lack evidence. For example, love is more than brain chemicals. What can I do?
Yeah. All of our OCD attacks the things that are important to us, right? I want to start with that. The reason it's so hard for us to do this work is because OCD attacks things, people, values that mean the most to us, right? That are really important. If it attacked things we didn't care about, we'd probably be able to let it go. And it probably actually, intrusive thoughts probably do attack things we don't care about, but we don't get stuck on those, right? They don't become sticky because they don't really bother us. But what do, right? We allow our intrusive thoughts to be there just like anyone else does, and we lean into the uncertainty around them, right? So love is more than brain chemicals. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Okay, right? We don't try to solve it. We don't try to understand it. We don't try to have certainty. We accept the anxiety around it. And I would push that, like, okay, so if it is, what does that mean? Why does that scare you? Why is that triggering, right? Let's get to what our core fears are, and let's also lean into those.
Let's see here. Ethan's sexy. Ethan's awesome.
Love Ethan so much. Why is Liz on here?
Yeah, I'll skip those. No, it doesn't say that. Don't be so mean to yourself. Don wrote, hi, Liz. Great meeting you at the IOCDF conference in DC a few years ago. Ethan, nice meeting your girlfriend last week. What a great talk you all gave. Thanks. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Don. Tom, our dear friend Tom, who was on Adjust Ethan. I do things with less fear of triggers because I know better how to deal with them and have my tools. I want to live my life happily and empowered. I love that. I want to live my life happily and empowered. Absolutely. But
I had a patient once who coined a slogan here in treatment recovery that I don't want to live a half life. And I just loved it because it was like, yeah, like I can choose to still do all those things that are important, but struggle along the way. But I'm like, I'm letting OCD win, or I could just have full freedom, right? And I don't want to live this half life anymore.
Said no medication ever. It's a half life. Anyway, Nancy wrote, well, I have struggled in thriving in life with this condition. I have set my goal to apply to the doctoral program in social work at UT Austin, but my parents are kind of worried because of my mental health. Any thoughts, Liz?
Do not ever let OCD, mental health, or anxiety make decisions for you. If you want to get your PhD in social work, which I also did, so you know I'm going to promote it, especially here at UT here in Houston, you know what I mean, here in Austin, in Texas, go for it. Do not let OCD make decisions for you. This is what we call greater good. We set goals that require us to push against OCD. If you don't set goals that require you to push against OCD, it's a lot harder to be motivated to do the hard work of ERP. But when we have this goal of like, I want to get my PhD in social work, I want to go make a difference, I want to go be in academia, whatever you want to do long term, you know that if you give in to OCD, it's going to impact your ability to achieve that goal. And so it will push you to have to fight OCD and to have to keep it at bay so that you can achieve this goal. And I commend you for it. Never let OCD make a choice for y'all's life.
And to that point, it also means, you know, we'd be very clear in saying, to Liz's point about white knuckling, when we say don't let it choose for you, that doesn't mean ignoring it. That doesn't mean just like pushing through. It means like, what action steps do I have to take that are healthy, that teach me how to cope and successfully manage OCD so I can do the things that I love. So to Liz's point, having a critical goal in mind like that, Nancy, is okay.
I'm showing y'all this. So this is, you can't see me. This is so weird.
You never looked better though.
Where am I? Okay. So I make this. This is super, super easy and cheap, but I have everyone here do it. But it's, what is your greater good statement, right? So your greater good statement that we just shared might be to get my PhD from UT Austin. What are your short-term goals, right? To be able to go to classes, to be able to get an apartment, to be able, whatever it might be that achieve that. What are the long-term goals? What are ways that OCD interferes with these goals? That's really important. And then what are your OCD symptoms that you need to address to make those goals achievable, right? Because you can have 100 OCD symptoms, but some of them you're like, meh, whatever. But the ones that you're like, okay, I know I can't go get my PhD if I'm rereading a chapter for 10 hours because I'm not going to be able to get my reading done. You're going to be more motivated to work on those rereading exposures first than other ones because you know it will directly impact that greater good statement, that goal that's important. So these are like cheesy little ways that just how do we remind ourselves, right? How do we reinforce our greater good goal and keep it in mind and as the reason why we want to do this hard work? Because neither Ethan and I, we might be saying like embrace uncertainty. That sounds fuzzy, so it's kind of cheesy. I don't really love it because like who the heck wants to embrace uncertainty when you're feeling like you are, right? Like that sounds horrible. But be willing, right? Because embracing uncertainty also means freedom. peace, ability to do those things that are important to you.
And it's hardly cheesy. And like even breaking it down more granularly and micro for greater good, I always talk about, and you've heard me if you've been on these shows, like by choosing OCD, what am I not choosing? And I always like to identify what I'm not choosing. Like, what am I literally not choosing? What am I saying no to? And when I make the decision to choose a compulsion, and it becomes really when I say it all the time, I didn't know what therapists meant when they said you need to fight your OCD. I was like, I didn't understand that. It was very ambiguous and vague. But the minute I understood that when I choose OCD, I was not choosing something meaningful to me. And then I made those things specific. So, if I desperately wanted to ask a girl out, and by choosing a compulsion, I'm literally saying, no, I want to live alone. It's like, no, I really don't. So I'm going to choose to not compulse. And the more specific I made those choices in my head when I got to that fork in the road and knew what I was giving up, the more encouraged and inspired I was to make a value-driven choice and not a compulsion choice. So, Valerie, yes, my ERP has been life-changing. Margaret, good to see you, Margaret. Curious if the fear of something happening does happen. For example, you do get sick, then do you ERP that, or do you go forward with living with the uncertainty? I had a incident, I call it death by coleslaw, because it was the other time I got food poisoning, and I was eating coleslaw that tasted funny, and everything in my body said, like, don't eat it, it's food poisoning. And I was like, no, I'm not going to give in to OCD and blah, blah, blah. And it was bad, and I got sick. And I could have easily said, oh my God, OCD was right. It was protecting me. To answer your question, I think that, and Liz would probably agree, if after you get sick, you start engaging in obsession and compulsions to prevent that sickness from happening, in this case, throwing up, or engaging in maladaptive behavior to gain certainty, I think then you would engage in ERP. I think if you chalk it up to, sometimes circumstances, sometimes coincidence happens. And, this was a time where I missed, or, I got food poisoning. Maybe OCD was right. Maybe it wasn't. Regardless, this happened and I'm just going to move forward, then I wouldn't ERP that. But I don't know if Liz agrees or disagrees.
I agree. I think, Margaret, here, what I'll say across the board is that uncertainty ends up being required when this happens, right? Because if your fear happens, you have to accept some level of uncertainty somewhere because you weren't able to prevent it, right? Or OCD didn't work, or you didn't do it, whatever. And so what we often find more than that is that the fear of something happening tends to be more triggering than if someone actually has something happen, right? And so most people are more, right? Think about panic disorder. It's scarier. Most people will say the fear of having a panic attack is worse than the panic attacks themselves. And so even if something bad happens, things are going to happen. Unexpected things will happen. We can't prevent everything in life, and we're not supposed to, and it's not worth trying to live your life trying to, right? But when it does, most of the time, people are actually able to deal with it and manage it just fine. And that also means that they are accepting and choosing uncertainty in that.
Absolutely.
Living in it, living through it.
Hi, Alexandra. I saw you here. I haven't had a chance to say hello. One of our newest IOCDF advocates. So welcome. Lois at 731 asked Ethan, what do you tell yourself with self-harm OCD? Sit with uncertainty with that used to be so uncomfortable, but now it's a little better. I guess that's progress. Yeah, that's huge progress. And
progress.
Yeah, I would give yourself insane amounts of credit,
And you push it, right? And you keep doing those exposures, and you keep leaning into the uncertainty until you're like, you know what, like this bores me, or like I can laugh at being able to do any of that because there's no trigger at all anymore. And each time you do it, it should get better. We don't expect, I want to caveat this for any of you. If you came and saw me and you're my client, I do not ever expect somebody on day one to say, okay, Liz, willing to lean into uncertainty, let's go for it. But what you have to do, as John Grayson would say, is you have to be willing to learn to live with uncertainty. We don't expect that day one you're just bought in and you're going to do it, because then you don't need to come to treatment and like you could just do it on your own at home, right? But you have to be willing. You before you do ERP, you should be willing to learn to live with uncertainty, how to learn to accept uncertainty and to have a lifestyle of it. And so progress, right? It getting easier, that's huge. Those are the steps towards freedom.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add to that, even though the question was for me. Thank you, Liz. Just kidding. No, Lois, to your point, just the willingness to for things to possibly happen. That was what I was talking about, that moment where I was, for me, when I was afraid I was going to hit my head, it wasn't so much, I was worried more about had I done it, more so than I'm going to do it. And if I had done it, then I'm ignoring a problem that I need to, a life-threatening issue that I should address immediately. I need to go to the hospital. I need to get a CAT scan, and I need to make sure my brain's okay because I could die. So ignoring that felt completely irresponsible. And to say that I would get dysregulated is an understatement, because I felt like I was going to die. Like I thought I was going to die. I believed my belief in that OCD fear that you're going to die was so intense and so high. Whatever little percent of healthy brain was going, this is ridiculous, I wasn't even listening to that. The minute I decided to let myself die, right, by letting it go, by being out there, by like, yeah, I could drop dead at any moment. I could have a seizure at any moment, but you know what? I'm going to have a seizure at the grocery store while I'm buying food. I'm going to have a seizure at work. The minute I just left it, I just washed my hands of being responsible for that, is really when I started to get better. And the willingness to let the fear be there. Did I, may I, will I, could I, might I, should I don't know, maybe not. At the end of the day, chalk it up to OCD, and leave it at that. I will tell you, my therapist, I don't know whether this is okay to say or not. She's a bit of a maverick, the one who treated me initially, but I was, Liz will preface this because she'll get nervous, but let me just say, so self-harm, we do not want to harm ourselves. We're not, wow, why can't I think of the word? But it's again,
unwanted intrusive thought.
Yeah. I was thinking the against our values, what's the word? The term,
ego dystonic.
Thank you. But so when I bring up suicide right now, I'm talking about no interest in taking our lives. Not at all.
It terrifies you. It scares you. The thought of suicide.
We're afraid we're going to accidentally do it. I remember coming into therapy every day. The first thing my therapist would say is like, you're awful at attempting suicide. You're like the worst. Like you're the worst I've ever seen. And I laugh at that now because she was right. And, when I do have a self-harm thought, I kind of play that back and I'm like, yeah, I kind of suck at it. Probably OCD, and moving on with my life now. And I'm gonna live with the possibility that I may not, whatever. Recognizing that it's OCD, assuming that it is really helpful. But I think that's awesome progress, Lois, and you rock. We have 2 minutes left. So unfortunately, if you have comments or questions, I'll give you some emails. You can reach out to Liz or I. Liz, I'm so glad I got to ask you some questions, but thank you.
You like my way I worked that? No,
yeah, she totally manipulated it. But to be fair, I knew she was doing that in my letter.
Yes. You can have me on again, and we can just make it a batter Liz questionnaire.
No, we're just going to change it to just Liz. But this was awesome. Betsy wrote, Dr. Liz, you were a powerhouse tonight with a bunch of exclamation marks. You were on fire, Liz. And I think you gave such amazing insight and input and experience. And yep, there it is. It's true. I didn't make it up.
Okay, well, y'all know me. We've got to rapid fire through the rest, or it's going to bother me. So can we jump to Adam at 6?
This is an hour. That's
okay. People are going to stay on, and they're going to be excited, and you can hop off if you have to.
Okay.
Adam at 6:41.
Okay, yeah, Adam. Let me find this. I could totally hang out. Well, we have to ask Fran though.
Fran said he could.
Oh, he did?
Fran already agreed.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Fran.
Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Go ahead, read it, Liz.
All right, so these will be like our rapid fire. I was wondering how to pick challenges from a hierarchy in order to challenge myself enough to progress, but not push myself over the edge and send me into compulsions. This is critical. I love this question. Is there a way to find a sweet spot? It gets even trickier because numbers and intensity seem to change based on where I am, and trickier because of OCD. All right, love this question, Adam. So important. 2 things. Exposures should always be challenging yet obtainable. So they need to push us. If an exposure is easy, don't do it. Don't waste your time. You need to move on to something that's challenging, right? It needs to be challenging. It should trigger us. We should feel uncomfortable, but it should be obtainable. And when I say obtainable, we have to be able to commit to response prevention and uncertainty. If you do a high level exposure, a big E, but really small RP because you give in and you ritualize, that is not going to be useful at reducing OCD like it would if you do a small exposure, small E, and big RP, right? So if that exposure is going to push you into compulsions, don't choose it. Choose one right below it. But think about, what is the exposure I can do that I can commit to doing without compulsions? Start there, and it should be tough.
Awesome. Lois at 7:41 p.m. asks, so is it living with uncertainty of the fear of the theme or the theme itself? Bless you, Liz. No need to cover your mouth. We
Um,
can't get sick from you right here.
True.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's living with uncertainty across the board, and you're going to apply that to your specific themes, but you're going to apply it to your life, that you are accepting a lifestyle of uncertainty. It doesn't matter, guess what OCD subtype you have. When we all say ERP works the same, uncertainty works the same. You accept uncertainty across the board. That is the core of all of the treatment.
Betsy at 743 would love Liz's idea of dealing with other subtypes and how to handle the ERP without white knuckling, saying maybe not. Hope that makes sense. It doesn't, Betsy. Go ahead, Liz.
Makes great sense. We will 100% do that. So we're going to be doing lunch and learns and ask the experts. These will be on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern, and we will dive into this. And I'm going to make that a requirement for next year, that both Chris Tronson and I, who run that together, are going to really do some like rapid fire. Okay, I deal with contamination. How do you do it? I deal with this. But here's what I'll push. Accepting and choosing uncertainty and maybe not statements can work across the board. Yeah, maybe I might harm myself. Maybe I won't. I'm just going to keep eating and using the steak knife and see. Yep, like something bad may or may not happen to a family member, and I guess I'll find out later if it does. You know, yeah, I might get a bloodborne illness, and I may not know until I already have it, and I've already been exposed by touching this doorknob, right? Again, it's unwanted thoughts, and so it's about just accepting the uncertainty around that unwanted thought. OCD wants us to be certain. You can never be certain. So what happens is OCD wants us to be certain, then you get totally stuck in these rituals and loops trying to meet certainty or meet OCD where it is, and you get more stuck because it's not feasible.
Great. And incidentally, I did say rapid fire early in the evening, but you went long, so I will send you a new idea.
This is all my fault. Everyone blame me. Bad comments go to Liz.
It's at 7:45 p.m. Everyone needs to know that I love her dearly. How do you recommend dealing with OCD thoughts that are not necessarily fearing some bad outcome, but they're more just an ugly thought or image, or maybe a thought of a person you don't like who triggers you, so you're worried about that thought contaminating your experience? It's hard to put your finger on what exactly the feared outcome is. It's more just a dark, ugly thought that is threatening to stick with you. Same way. You know, embrace the thought, embrace the image. You know, be okay with it. You know, you don't have to be okay not being okay with it. Liz, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, so I think what Ethan was talking about earlier in the segment is he was saying a comment of like, yeah, and it's been more triggering for me lately, some of my OCD, because I have important things coming up, or because I've got these really important meetings. And we find is that especially for like this type of OCD, sometimes these thoughts will stick because it's like, oh no, like now that I have that image in my mind, or it's threatening, or I can't move on until I get rid of it. I can't move on until like my mind is clear.
Flexibility.
Right? What?
Flexibility.
And accept that. Like, oh, awesome. Like that's a weird, dark, ugly thought. Yeah. And I'm scared of it. And I'm still going to go do these other things, right? Accept those, what you're afraid of, accept the fear. The more you try to tell yourself, oh, well, this is irrational, or I shouldn't be afraid of this, or I shouldn't let this bother me, the more it's going to bother you, right? Yeah. So you're still accepting the fear, the uncertainty, the weirdness, the ugliness of these images, and you become okay with it.
Liz, can you be able to send me that handout? Oh, the handout that you held out. I was like, what handout?
Oh, that I held out. My handmade handout. Yeah, I'll send it to Fran, and maybe we can post it on IOCDF.org/peace of mind for people to download. Cool. Now my handout's being
Go ahead. We sell signed copies for $5 a piece. It could go to the foundation. But anyway, yep.
Happy to do it.
Let's see. Natalie wrote, I've mentioned this before on Ethan's show, but wondering what Liz thinks. I have health OCD, but my fears are actual products that have been shown to cause cancer, et cetera. For example, we are looking for a new house, and I saw in the garage they had Roundup spray, which there are constant commercials warning it causes cancer. So I told my husband that house wouldn't work. Is that my OCD or protecting our kids from actual harm?
That's your OCD, period. No question about it, right? And what I would say is, what would your husband say, Natalie? If you were to say to your husband, hey, did you notice that Roundup? Like, does that bother you at the house? I bet he'd say, no, doesn't bother me at all, right? And so, but you would have to commit. You'd have to commit to, I'm going to buy that house and accept that Roundup might have been used and we all might get cancer from it, right? Now, it is hard if you want to debate. A lot of people can get, well, but there's a real risk there. There's a risk in anything. We all take risks. There's a risks of getting cancer from things we eat, from shampoo products we use, whatever it might be, right? It is impossible to live that life risk-free. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to start having your kids use Roundup. If that's something that you really don't want to do, and like you're like, no, even without OCD, I wouldn't do that. But do I want you to be able to go to Home Depot and walk past the aisle with Roundup? Absolutely. And we should do that as an exposure, because guess what? Now what's happening is that fear of Roundup, the fear of chemicals, is dictating decisions that are important for your life. And that means OCD is winning, and we need to not let OCD make those decisions.
Rachel Benny at 7:57 p.m. in general, does talking about your OCD have a negative or positive effect? I think you guys are so amazing to do this.
Depends who you're talking to. If you're doing talk therapy, it's not going to have a positive effect on reducing your symptoms. So talk therapy is not a proven modality for OCD treatment. ERP is. We talk all the time about this: exposure and response prevention, specialized OCD treatment. Often people integrate ACT, DBT, whatever else people need, right? But ERP at its core. Talking, though, support groups, these sort of things, it's critical. Having a community, being able to be connected. Dr. Katya Moritz talks a lot about individuals with medical diagnoses who are undiagnosed, and how hard it is to be in a population that's undiagnosed. Having a diagnosis, having a community, it can be critical, it can be important. But if you're relying on your community to engage in compulsions with you and do reassurance seeking and getting stuck in OCD loops together, it isn't going to be helpful. But talking about it, educating about it, doing advocacy, both Michael Janicki, Ethan, and myself, we all did a panel on this years ago, but we talked about how advocacy is kind of that fifth leg, right? So we talk a lot about, Ethan's going to kill me because we're going over. Sorry, y'all. I don't really care. So we talk a lot about what is OCD taken away from us, and all of the ways some of us have to grieve so much that we've lost from our OCD: teenage years, adult years, careers, life, relationships, you name it. And I'm a big believer that advocacy is the only way to fill that gap. I believe that treatment helps get us stable and allows us to move forward and to start to reclaim things in our life, but that advocacy fills those holes, right? I always talk about it turns our pain into a purpose. And so I think talking about it, advocating, for me, it's been life-changing. Ethan, I don't know your perspective on it.
I said we were in the same camp. Mike said to me on day one, if I ever met him, he said the best thing you can do for your OCD is help others. And at the time I didn't get it. I thought he was crazy because I was so sick, and I was like, I need to help, not others. And he was absolutely right. The best medicine for my OCD is helping others. The other thing I'll add to that question about talking about OCD, and Rachel, I hope you're well, by the way. And I did send the picture of the fireplace to Chris. I know it's an inside thing, but I did send it. Just want to say, in the context, you may not have meant this, but I know for me, and let's say in my relationship with Katie, because we both have OCD, I know for me, if I talk about my OCD to her, if I'm talking about symptoms, that means I'm seeking reassurance. And I may not be actively asking her for something.
You're confessing.
Yeah, and it may not have been something I've done. I'm just like, oh man, I am having so many thoughts about blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm seeking reassurance. Even if I'm trying to justify that I'm not, I am. So I know for me, I thought Liz had to say something.
No. I was just going to clarify for people, and I know you'll wrap it up. Tell, ask, confess all counts as a ritual, right? Sometimes we don't need a response, but just saying it, we've diffused that responsibility.
So what was super interesting, and y'all saw us, I guess, 2 weeks ago together. When I first got in a relationship with Katie, I hadn't dated anyone with OCD along with myself. And what I found myself doing is I felt like I had permission to talk about my thoughts, because I couldn't do it with anybody else because they didn't understand. I couldn't do it with my parents because it wasn't healthy, because I learned not to. But now here was a person that got it and I could. And I started to realize that the more I talked about it, the more present they become. And so I talk about it with my therapist, and she's like, you need to stop that shit. So, I made a really concerted effort early on to be like, I can't talk about this stuff. I can now I can say, I'm noticing that OCD is really loud today. I can say that. That's a very observational third person kind of act approach to it, but I'm not going to get into the symptomatology. I'm not going to get into the minutia. I'm not going to get into the details. And so I'm sure, Rachel, you weren't talking about that, but in terms of talking about your OCD, for me in that way, it's not healthy. But yes, talking about it in a support group and advocacy and all those things is really, really good.
If you're saying it to feel better, it's probably a ritual.
That's it.
Let's put up that last comment, because I want to end with that. Nancy, I am so excited. This is golden, and this is why we do our work. So Nancy just bought her UT Austin shirt, and she is committing to going, because guess what? She's choosing a lifestyle of uncertainty so she can have freedom. So that made my day. That's why we do this work. I love you guys. And Ethan, I am so grateful for you letting me steal the space with you tonight.
Oh my God, are you kidding? Like, just so everybody knows, like, I'm only an advocate and I'm only at this place because I like stand on Liz's shoulders. So
come on.
No, but that's the truth. Liz, I looked up to Liz. Her mom, you know, whether she knows it or not, saved my life when my mom first called and saying, like, my son needs help. We can't find help. And I got to know her as an advocate. She helped me grow as an advocate. And I wouldn't be here without her. So, you know, she can steal the spotlight anytime. I've always learned so much from Liz. So thank you for being here. I couldn't be more sincere about that.
Well, I'm inspired by you, by the work you do. And for those of you that are joining the advocacy community, welcome. We need you, and we are excited you're here. Ethan is the one to thank for being instrumental in growing that with IOCDF. So we're grateful for your work, and we're grateful that for all the time and energy you dedicate. And of course, Fran, who's behind the scenes and has been putting up your questions and doing all the marketing and maintenance, who doesn't get to show our face. A huge shout out to him and all IOCDF.
And we're grateful to all of you, as always, for your input, for your suggestions, for your vulnerability, for your insight. You advocate right along with us, and that's what makes these so special. Hi, Mom. Okay, so with that, and you're all very, very welcome. Some quick roundup. She thanked the IOCDF. She thanked Fran. Thank you so much. Real quick, registration is open for the online OCD camp. It's created especially for youth between the ages of 6 and 17. Camp will feature 2 days of interactive sessions and activities for 3 age groups. In addition, the program will include sessions for parents, guardians, and opportunities for fun and socialization with other families. You can learn more and register at iocdf.com/OCD camp. Do we have that link, Fran? There it is. iocdf.com/OCD camp. Tomorrow, we have a lot of programming this week. Tomorrow, Chris's Corner, Chris Stronson, Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, right here. YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, you name it, you'll find him. And then on Thursday, we have a town hall at 7 p.m. I'll be hosting along with some really amazing guests, so you'll want to tune in then. Finally, if you haven't already and want to be notified about all the programming the ICF is having over the next month, definitely be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook and YouTube. You can also subscribe and follow on Watch on Twitch. Hey now, oh, right over Liz's face. We nailed it. Liz, raise your hands. Go like, there it is. Oh, it's so funny. Somebody screen cap that. Okay, last but not least, we gave out the info at IOCDF email. Please never hesitate to reach out. We are always there. Always give out my email on this as well. I check this daily. I'm caught up. I am caught up. Email me. The email is justethan@iocdf.org. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, topics, if you want to see Liz again, don't hesitate to email.
If you don't want to see Liz again, let him know.
Those out. Email me at justethan@iocdf.org. I think Fran will put that up for us. Also, if you have questions, new questions, thoughts, and you have them for Liz, please don't hesitate to, there it is, justethan@iocdf.org. Don't hesitate to email me and just put Liz in the subject line. Ask your question. I'll be happy to forward it to Liz and we'll get you an answer. With that, thanks again to Liz. Thanks again to you. I know we're over. And thanks again to Fran so much for sticking around. Wonderful evening. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. Feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night.
Bye, y'all.